Welcome to FMBug number 85, delayed from January. Sorry we couldn't make that one. Got a few things going on. Yeah, tonight we've got Christian's going to talk about his a couple of new functions in MonkeyBread. Wim is going to present us with the AI model doesn't know your solution. Gary's going to take us through the news. And Kate's going to talk about AI image recognition, and then we'll switch the recording off and head to the virtual bar as opposed to the physical one. Do we kick
You'll
off?
actually get to go down to the pub
Yeah,
when you have meetings. You say, "Oh, yeah, we're really going to the pub."
normally we would do. At this one, the pub is a little bit of a way away, but
Yeah,
yeah, we like to go down the pub when we've had a meeting. We
yeah,
started these off as in-person meetings, and we would inevitably go for a drink or a meal, as Ara will remember.
yeah.
Great evenings.
And yeah, conversation carried on there. It was mostly FileMaker talk, mostly.
I always found it really fun when we went to the curry place in Brighton, where we turned up and then there was about six of us all talking about FileMaker, and we emptied the restaurant because everyone moved out. It's like, what is this lot talking about? It's like, okay.
So let's kick off with you, Christian, if you're ready.
Yeah, I am.
Good.
I'm ready. Yeah. So I recently published a new version of MBS plugin. You may have seen it in January, and we already have the next beta version of the next version. And I thought I could just point you to two new features. There is a new translation API included with macOS 26, and also turns out it was there a version before. So if you have a need for local translation using Apple's frameworks on Mac or iOS, you can use them on device free of charge. And they come with a couple of languages like English, British English, as well as German. So we can do some translation. I can pick a source language and a destination language and say, wait, did I lose my phone? Okay, I need to install the language. So in System Preferences, there's this panel where you can install languages. And there we have English to download and use. So, okay, done. And then we can click Translate and something happens. So you may just translate whatever text you have in FileMaker. This can be used to automatically fill in missing translation for your user interface. If you have some tables for your language data, and then you can just use it to translate stuff. So the plugin has a backport to use it on macOS 15 and iOS 18, but that was broken in the 16.0 release. So please use 16.1 better if you want to try it on the older operation systems. Any questions about translation?
No, it's something that we are doing because we list our products on Amazon. So we have to list on all in Europe. So we have to translate all of the descriptions and text and so forth. Use Amazon's backend to do it, but 9 times out of 10, Amazon gets it wrong. So this could be useful.
Okay. Yeah, the difficulty in translation is usually things which are not so well. So if you have some things which are difficult to translate, this is as stupid as everyone else. So this is a lock on the castle, but this doesn't work. So you may try it.
Yeah. It's worth trying. We try all different options. We're getting to the point now with AI, God knows what else. We're looking at all various things, and obviously for what we do, some of ours are tied to characters from the films, so it really gets messy with that. So it'd be interesting to see whether or not there's a way you can say in the language translation to don't translate this thing by putting it in like a square bracket.
Yeah.
You don't want it to. So it's doing those tricks and tips really.
Okay, another new feature in the plugin is here our search. So you can click the button on the top right and you get a search window. The plugin makes a snapshot of all your scripts, and so you can search over all your scripts. What you see is already the updated version where we have some grouping for the different results. So we have one script here where we have results, and then you see which lines have the result. And on macOS, I can click on the search results and jump to the script and to the line. While on Windows, we have a similar feature, but it doesn't jump. So on Windows, we got a button there, and then we also copy a snapshot of the scripts, and we can search for something and also find things on Windows.
How's the performance on that, Christian, when you've got a very large database with lots of scripts? Is it?
Where is my contact one? This has 2,000 scripts. 1, 2. It takes 2 seconds, yeah.
Well, I'm glad I asked. I should have known better, really, with you. That's fine.
It was always going to be an answer of ridiculously fast.
I know, yeah. I just wanted to ask anyhow. That's
No.
fine.
There's something I recently added. So you can copy the results.
Nice.
Okay. Any questions, any ideas? Please let me know.
It's good.
Okay.
I saw in 16.1, you can also jump to a script group, or you can select a script group in the plugin.
Yeah, I have a command to a new command. If you want to automate it, no, where is it? FileMaker. So many stuff. There, select group, or where if you do some scripting in the script workspace, you can pick a group and select it, and optionally expand it. I made this for some people who do automation within FileMaker. Okay.
Good.
So
Yeah.
that's it for me.
Great.
Just the
Thank
two
you,
things
Christian.
I wanted to show.
Well, keep up the good work. I'm even if I didn't say that, there'd be no way you wouldn't. But thanks for bringing that to us. That's really good. I reckon I could actually, just out of curiosity, should we have a quick show of hands who uses Christian's plugin? Yeah, I think
Two
pretty much
hands, yeah.
everyone.
A lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's excellent. In that case, I think if we are already Wim, we may as well go straight on to your talk if you're happy to go ahead now.
Absolutely.
Over to you.
All right, let me share my screen and roll right into it. So this will be basically a modified version of the talk that I gave at Engage U in Antwerp back in November, so the big European conference. Originally, when I was planning on giving this talk in November, I was really going to go deep into the technical aspects of MCP and show different uses of the MCP. And in the preparation for this and talking to a lot of people internally at Soliant, I came to the realization that there's still a lot of conceptual basic knowledge that is missing from a lot of us. Because for many of us, for most of us, I should say, everything that has to do with AI is a journey, and we're still at the beginnings of that journey. So there's still a lot of skills to discover and concepts to really internalize so that we can make the right decisions in picking tools and implementations and whatnot. So fundamentally, that is what I'm going to try and cover today. Let me share my screen this away. Nope. That away. And I want to make this as interactive as we can, right? So this is a small group. So if you have any questions, shout them out, because I won't really see the chat or anything like that. So shout them out. Also, if you have some experience with some of these things, feel free to inject your knowledge. And if at any point in this you want me to pivot away from the more conceptual theoretical thing into showing some actual things, I can do that too. But I'm going to say getting these concepts down is worth the effort. I know that because I tend to be that guy where I'm going like, yeah, whatever, right? Like I'll learn it as I'm doing it. And I was finding that with all these things AI, that doesn't really apply. I find myself hitting walls more often than I really wanted to, because I had made assumptions about how things work, what they look like, what to expect. Even the whole nomenclature of a lot of these things is totally different, right? So I had to learn a whole new vocabulary, and I was making these assumptions about what all of this meant, and it came back to bite me in the ass. So that's why I really want to focus on the concept. And what I have there on the screen is true, right? If you don't know why it matters, or even why that is, and how to make it not so, then you're really in the right place for this presentation here. And I believe, and this is sort of my promise to you, is that by the end of it, you'll feel better armed with those fundamentals of MCP, why it matters, and how it all works. All right. So any AI-assisted workflow that you may be putting together at some point, and this is sort of like the core basic schematic of an AI application, and it's the one that we're all very, very familiar with. Like this is a chat application, right? Where the input there on the top left-hand side is somebody typing in something into a chat window, whether it's a browser or desktop app, doesn't matter. Whatever you type in goes to the AI application. The AI application is going to do stuff with that, right? So there's a text generation model hooked up to that. Maybe there's some memory to preserve some context and preserve the history of the conversation, that kind of thing. But it's pretty much going to be a given that at some point, when you start putting these applications and workflows together, you'll want to have access to your FileMaker solution from inside that AI application. So that's really the problem that we're trying to solve. And when I say access to your FileMaker solution, I don't just mean data. I also mean access to the business logic, right? So some of the things that you have already, workflows that you have already solved inside your FileMaker solution, maybe you want to be able to run those from inside your AI application, right? So not just data, also the business logic. And to be clear, we are talking about workflows that do not originate from inside FileMaker, right? But from outside FileMaker. So if you're inside FileMaker, you already have access to all the data and the scripts, so you don't need to jump it through any hoops there. So we're not going to talk very much about the AI features that exist inside FileMaker Pro, right? This is really all about this scenario where you have some workflow that is AI enabled, and you need to get access to your FileMaker solutions for that. And the problem isn't limited to just accessing FileMaker solutions, right? AI applications need to have access to any number of systems to be useful, and sometimes multiple systems at the same time. And every AI provider, and I mean Anthropic, Cohere, OpenAI, right? So every AI provider was reinventing the wheels, because all of this stuff is so new that they're all moving ahead, they're all forging ahead, and they're all creating their own way of doing this. And so ChatGPT has plugins, for instance, and Claude has tools, and Copilot has extensions. And all of these have a different way of putting these things together. They have different APIs, different authentication schemes, different deployment models. Where do you put these things when you build them? So from every AI application and workflow that we would build, we would run the risk of writing the same integrations over and over. And again, not just to FileMaker solutions, but to any other system, whether it's ServiceNow or MailChimp or QuickBooks, right? So any system that you want to hook into that AI workflow that you're building. So ideally, we want to have a way that isn't tied to the provider, but a way that is non-proprietary, that just works, that is generic, that is the standards. One of the reasons why that we want to talk about these things is also this, right? So there is a lot of interest in AI, clearly. But by the same token, there's also a lot of trepidation around these things, right? Where do I start? What does that look like? So there's this fear of missing out, that if you don't spend time doing this, you'll feel like you're left behind, whether it's us as developers or we hear some of these things from our clients as well. But there's also that fear of joining in, like how much time do I need to spend on this? And I don't have days that I can spend on doing research and doing all of that good stuff. So that's definitely one of the reasons why we want to talk about that, because demystifying what it is and how it works, I think, can get us over these humps of going like, I grok it, I understand it. So then at least it opens up the doors to start thinking about how to implement some of these things. So we're going to spend time on exactly that, like how does it work? And almost more importantly, towards the end there, we're going to talk about what is it about the way that you should be thinking about this and implement this is going to make the difference between failure and success when you start thinking about these. So I want to be able to spend some time on that one as well. And certainly if you have any questions about that, like I said, just shout out and we'll talk about it. All right, so MCP, or Model Context Protocol. Nope, that was for the other one. Before the first word in Model Context Protocol is model, right? So what is a model again? I showed you this schematic, which is a very basic AI application, right? So the AI model is that part. And obviously it's a crucial part in the AI application, right? Because that is in the case of a chat, that is the thing that is going to generate the answer. It's almost the most crucial thing in there, right? That's because it will be responsible for taking your inputs, maybe taking some of your FileMaker data that you provide, synthesize it, aggregate it, summarize it, whatever it is that you may be asking, it is the AI model that is going to be responsible for doing that. Right? So we'll expand the AI application to this, right? Where there's now an MCP server hanging off of that as well. And the MCP server then has access to your FileMaker solution. Fundamentally, that's how it works. So when I say AI application, it's really just that part that is encircled there, right? The AI application is just a bunch of code, right? Whether it's JavaScript or Python or stuff in your browser that uses a .NET, whatever, right? So, but the AI application has the ability to talk to an AI model. Now, the AI model is not part of your AI application, right? The AI model runs on an AI model server. If you use the commercial providers, again, that's OpenAI, that's Cohere, that's Anthropic, that's Mistral, all of these things. But that's separate from your AI application. Your AI application knows how to interact with the model, but it is not deployed in the same place. Okay. And then we have the thing that we will be expanding to and talk about today. That's the MCP server. Again, MCP server is different, right? It is not part of your AI application. You can deploy it on the same thing depending on how you do it, but typically your AI application is going to talk to an MCP server that is somewhere. In the same sense as it's talking to an AI model that is hosted on an AI model server that is hosted again somewhere else. Right? So fundamentally, we'll have these three aspects to contend with, right? Your AI application, that's the stuff under your control. That could be FileMaker for all intents and purposes, right? Like FileMaker can be an AI application because FileMaker knows how to speak to an AI model server. But we're not going to speak about FileMaker all that much. So you have your AI application, your AI model server, and your MCP server. And to broaden the AI application notion a little bit, like not everything is a chat experience, right? I know that's the one that we are most intimately familiar with, but there are AI applications that are way more complex than that. And so I want to emphasize that it's not all about chatting. And this setup, for instance, the trigger is not somebody typing in something. The trigger on the left-hand side there is an email coming into an email box, and it could be, say, a support email box. And we have an AI application that does sentiment analysis. It'll basically read the email and figure out, is this client happy or is this client sad or angry? So there's a model that is trained to do sentiment analysis that is hanging off that AI application. If we detect that the client isn't very happy, so if the sentiment is negative, we will then feed that to another AI application that has access to a text generation model, because maybe we want to compose a very nice email like right off the bat, right? To make the client feel heard. We'll generate a response to that. But maybe we want also have that AI application have access to the FileMaker solution, because we want to be looking up how many times has this client interacted with us in the last 12 months, right? Has the client bought anything from us in the last month, right? So there's some data that we may want to be collecting from our FileMaker solution, and then the output of that AI application maybe will put something on Slack channel somewhere, in the sense that somebody really needs to pay attention to this. We got a complaint from a customer. Here's some relevant information about that customer and their recent orders. And then somebody will have that in their Slack channel and can reply to that or deal with that, right? So again, not all about chatting, but some more complex things there as well. All right, model. I'm not going to spend too much time on the model, but fundamentally, a model is just it's a lot of math, right? So it can take an input, it'll go and detect patterns in what you're providing as the input, and it does that across multiple very complex layers, and then it'll generate an answer that is a prediction based on the patterns that it found in your prompt and what it's trained on, right? So the probability factor here is important, right? It's going to guess at what the answer is supposed to be. That's what a text generation model does. That's important because we'll come back to that later. If you really haven't seen what a model is, then think of it as it's a horrible oversimplification, but a model is almost like a spreadsheet, right? Because there are billions of numbers in a file. So if you never looked at a model, if you can download one of the open source models, that's what it looks like, right? A bunch of big files. You can see that a lot of these files, there are 5 gigs and plus in size. All of them together form the model. And then the model comes with, that's so like the bottom section of that screenshot there, with a bunch of instructions on how to use the model, right? Rules on how to interact with that. So it's kind of important to understand that the model is just that, right? Like a model doesn't have any conscience. A model doesn't have any awareness. It doesn't live, right? It's the AI application that brings it to life by interacting with it, right? But the model itself is just a dumb thing. It's billions of numbers that are just sitting there in binary files. All right, so when you see a diagram like that, it's really, and I mentioned already in one of the previous screenshots, it's really this, right? An AI model is hosted on an AI model server. And fundamentally, and this is a point that I made in pretty much all the talks that I've given around these things, the way that the AI application interacts with an AI model server to talk to the AI model, it's almost identical to any API integration that we've ever done, right? So these things are exposed to a URL. They take a JSON input, they provide you with a JSON output, just like all the APIs that we've ever interacted with. All right, I'll leave it at that. If you want to know more, I did a 5-day thing with Richard Carlton's live stream, and Todd Geist did another one the week after that really covers a lot of these fundamentals, where we go in deep and slowly around all these things, what the models are and how models work and all of that good stuff. So if you want to know more, I would say go look at those videos. I said in the beginning, and that was my opening slide, that models are fundamentally dumb, right? And one way that we can consider model dumb, why models are dumb, is that they are trained to a very specific point in time. So in your chat experience, you can ask a question like that: what is your cutoff date? And it will tell you what that date is. What it means is that the model is trained on knowledge up to that point in time, right? Anything that happened after that, it doesn't know. Like, it's not included in its knowledge base, if you will, right? So that's one thing to consider. And then the other thing is, when I say that they're dumb, their knowledge is limited in scope. It's a huge scope. Don't get me wrong, but it's still very limited in scope, in the sense that most models, the ones that we interact with, are generalists, right? They've been trained on a bunch of stuff, but they don't specialize in any of it. And there are models that are tuned and specialized. There's models for the medical science world. There's models for the financial world. Clearly, these have been trained specifically on a particular set of domain knowledge that isn't as general as most of the models that we interact with. And it'll tell you these things, right? When you ask a model, it'll tell you, like, anything that is real time or anything that's proprietary data, it will not know how to answer these things. So what it means is, when I ask a model any of these things, right, it just doesn't know the answers to those. And if you may go like, oh, Wim is talking out of his ass, because if I ask ChatGPT what the weather is like in Antwerp, it'll actually give you an answer. It does, but it's using tools to do that. That knowledge doesn't come from the model because it can't, right? A model is trained up to a point in time. The model doesn't know what the weather is outside my window. But the AI application can have access to a weather API, right? So the question that you ask can be interpreted as going like, oh, I know what this is. The user is asking about the weather. Let me look at the list of tools I have and I'll go call this weather API. That's how ChatGPT knows what the weather is like, but it's not the model. Fundamentally, that's what it is. So if I bring it to the example of a FileMaker solution, if I have an invoicing solution built into FileMaker and I ask ChatGPT, show me my list of open invoices, it doesn't know. It cannot know, right? Because how would it know? So that really brings us to the question of, how do we make it so that a model does know about your data? And there's a couple of different ways to do that. I mentioned one of them already. You can take a model and fine tune it, just like the models that exist for medical use or in the financial space, right? So what happens when you tune a model is that you take a model, treat it as the base model, and then you basically feed it a bunch of extra data, extra knowledge, if you will, right? It's a very complex problem, right? It's all of these billions of parameters, these billions of numbers that exist in a model. You basically start from random starting values and you try to make them into useful values. It's an involved process that is, I think it's safe to say, outside of the reach of pretty much everybody in the FileMaker space. Not everybody. Ian knows how to do this stuff, and he has already done that. It's probably not something that I'm going to touch unless I really have to. And in this case, if we want to give the AI application, and by extension, the model, access to a FileMaker solution, this doesn't really help, right? Because I can take my list of open invoices, feed it to a model to have it tuned, but as of that point in time, that model is dumb again, right? Because tuning is not a continuous process, it's a point in time process. So I can add my data to the model, but these questions still don't get a good answer, right? It's still static, it's still very point in time. So fine tuning, I'm not writing it off, right? Clearly, there is if you have a static body of knowledge, like I said, in the medical field or anything like that, manuals, although we'll talk about manuals in a sec. So there is stuff that as long as it's static enough that you can fine tune a model with, so that at least that knowledge is embedded in the model and you'll get accurate answers to those questions, but not these kinds of questions. Another way of telling a model about your data is through RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. In essence, it comes down to RAG being its own database, right? In a format that the model can work with. It's also somewhat static. The Claris AI model server has RAG capabilities, right? So you can turn that on if you deploy your own on-premise AI model server to the one that Claris has. Things like LM Studio have RAG capabilities. So there's a lot of the commercial providers like OpenAI, Cohere, Anthropic, they have RAG capabilities as well. So what does that look like, right? So you'll be creating a workflow that looks somewhat like this. On the left-hand side, you'll need a mechanism to add the data to your RAG database, right? So a manual, right? Something that is, again, fairly static. It could be a list of your open invoices. It wouldn't be the best use case, but say that you do that. So that's maybe JSON, maybe a PDF, something like that. You'll have to feed it through an embedding model. Embedding models are also the ones being used for semantic search and that kind of thing. The result of running something through an embedding model is really just a big array of numbers. Every number is a dimension. Think of it, a dimension as like a piece of nuance about something, right? Like if it's a picture and you embed it, it would be like, is it colorful, not colorful? Does it contain an animal? Yes or no? And basically every number is on a scale from -1 to +1 on how true that nuance is, right? So, and these embedding models have hundreds of nuances, right? That's what makes them powerful. Anyway, so you feed your document to an embedding model. It's the embedding that gets stored in a database. Now, on the right-hand side, your AI application now will need to have a tool, like a query tool, that it can query the database of these embeddings of these documents, so that when you ask it a question, the AI application can go look in that RAG database to say, do I have an answer there? Instead of just giving it to a text generation model to come up with an answer, right? So in this sense, it works with your data because your data is stored in a RAG database. But this is not a live connection to your FileMaker system, right? So you can take data out of your FileMaker system, PDF it, JSON it, whatever, embed it, and then feed it to a RAG database. But once it's there, it's separate from your live data, if you will, right? So fundamentally, these things are still not solved at the fundamental level, right? It's not a real-time process because you'll have to have a workflow where you take some document and feed it to the RAG database. So it's not a real-time process. So these questions will still remain unanswered, or at least even if I feed it my open invoices, tomorrow that data is stale, unless I come up with a workflow to continuously try and do that. Also note that this is for data only, right? Remember, I said that ideally we want to give the AI application access to our data clearly, but also to some of our business logic. A RAG doesn't do that, right? RAG is data. It doesn't have access to running a piece of your logic that you have already in your FileMaker database. So that's how we arrive at tool calling, right? And you go like, yeah, but you know what? If an AI application is just code, right? JavaScript, Python, whatever it may be, from inside that code, because there's really no mystery to what an AI application is, right? It really is just nothing more than code that you write. And that code has a way to talk to your AI model server. But fundamentally, it's just code. So from inside code, we can make an API call to FileMaker, right? We have the data API, we have the OData API. So we could do that from inside the AI application. And that's entirely true. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. If you were to write your own AI application, you could certainly do that, right? So that certainly works. The reason that MCP came to be, though, is that when you want to switch your AI application to something else, that whatever you have that makes that connection to your FileMaker database ideally should be a little bit abstracted out of your AI application and done in such a way that it's standards. Because maybe you want to switch out your FileMaker solution for some other solution at some point, right? So that's a reason why you could do this, right? Your own API integration to FileMaker from inside the AI application. But that's making it very tightly coupled, and that integration would then only work from that AI application, not from another AI application that you may want to, or another AI application workflow that you may want to be building. All right, so tool calling MCP, it's really all about that direct real-time access to other systems, right? So the things that we're lacking from fine-tuning a model or using RAG is being solved by tool calling. And MCP really happens when good people get together and go like, don't be dumb, and let's not all invent our own way of doing this. Let's figure out a standard way of doing the same thing. And that's really what MCP is, right? It's a standardized protocol. Protocol meaning it's a language, just like HTTP is a protocol. It's just a agreed upon way of communicating between two different things, right? And this is the official sort of infographic from MCP, and that's the MCP logo there. So it really comes down to, on the left-hand side, we have different AI applications. On the right-hand side, we have different back-end systems where data and logic lives. And MCP is going to be the thing, the protocol, the language that brings both of these together. So that's really what it is. So in practical terms, any system that holds data or business logic, you can hook up on the right-hand side, right? And pretty much every provider of any system, like Atlassian with Jira, Confluence, QuickBooks, right? So they will all be building their own MCP servers that basically will expose tools for the AI application to call. And that's exactly what Claris has done, right? So Claris has built their own MCP server to make it easy to hook up your FileMaker solutions to any AI application, right? And that's how we get here, right? So really what all that is needed is for the AI application to be able to speak MCP, right? That's what the MCP client is all about. So the AI application needs to have some code, some module in there that understands the MCP protocol and can speak MCP so that it can communicate to an MCP server. Pretty much all AI applications to date have the ability to speak MCP, right? So they are all MCP clients at this point. So if you're writing your own AI applications, you can download an SDK that can speak MCP, right? So if you're writing JavaScript code or anything like that, or you want to have a microservice for FileMaker to talk to, the microservice can speak MCP, you can download the SDK and roll your own. It's that's the beauty of having a standard. Right. So I mentioned before that pretty much all AI integrations, and that's, I want to drive home that point because it's such an important piece for the demystifying of how all this works. Talking to an AI model, right, is very similar in structure and what it looks like to any other API. And the same holds true for talking to an MCP server, right? So what we have here on screen over here is this MCP servers are exposed as a URL, just like any other API that you may have integrated with in the last couple of years. All you really need is a token here so that the MCP server knows that you're allowed to talk to it. So that's really the only two pieces that you need on the AI application side. And as an example, this greenish thing is the config file for LibreChat, which is an AI application that you can run on premise. It's really, think ChatGPT, but running locally, right? That's what LibreChat is. LibreChat is not the only tool that does that, but it's one that I kind of like. So in the config file, all I need to do is at the bottom there, add a name for my MCP server, that URL where my MCP server lives, and the token, right? And then from inside my chat clients, that's the screenshot for LibreChat there, that name will be exposed. I can select it, and as soon as I do, now my AI application, which is a chat application in this case, will have access to anything that is exposed through my MCP server. That's really as simple as it looks like from the client side, from the AI application side. So how does that work, right? So on the left-hand side, we have an AI application. which is also an MCP client, as they all are these days. And it speaks MCP to the MCP server. That's really where the protocol comes into play, right? They know how to speak, the MCP server knows how to understand, and that's really taken care of. Now, from the MCP server, there's the FileMaker server, because the Claris MCP server goes to your FileMaker server. That one speaks standard data API and OData API. Right? Nothing magical happening there. This is just reusing the APIs that we already have. That's the way that works, right? So again, in the interest of demystifying these things, that's really what it is. Nothing fancy. If you were to create your own MCP server, the way that you talk to FileMaker server, it's really any API that FileMaker server exposes is fair game, right? If you want to roll your own MCP server and you want to use ODBC, JDBC to FileMaker server, you can do that, right? Like nothing is going to stop you from that, because there is nothing that tells you how your MCP server needs to talk to the backend system. Any API that the backend system has is fair game. Right. So once we have these tools that are exposed to an MCP server, all of these things can now be answered, right? Because what day is today? That's really just having a mini API that knows to basically return what day is today. Same as with the weather, right? So if you have a weather API, then you can hook that up to an MCP server. The MCP server will create a tool that says, if the question is about weather, call me and I will make the call to the weather API and get you back to JSON that says what the weather is in Antwerp right now, right? Same now with these open invoices. I can create a tool, which is probably going to be a script on the FileMaker side to say, find open invoices. That script will become a tool that is available on the MCP server, so that when the user types in, I want to know how many invoices I currently have open, the AI application will know what tools it has available, will interpret the question as a good fit for calling this tool, will call the tool, basically call the MCP server to say, of these tools that you have, run this one. Then the MCP server will call the FileMaker script. The FileMaker script will return whatever it is that you want to return, which is typically going to be JSON with the information about the open invoices. MCP server is going to turn around and feed that back into the AI application, and the AI application will determine what to do with that. Is it just going to generate an answer that says you have 5 open invoices, or it could draw a table to say here are your open invoices, whatever that may be. And that's really up to you and the instruction writing you do on the AI application side on how this data, that return data, needs to be visualized. So data, I mentioned it's not just about data, it's also about the business logic, right? So now I can do something like this, right? It's not just about find me my open invoices, but maybe I can now create a workflow, an AI-enabled or assisted workflow that can help me approve invoices, right? So I can do that too. So how does that work? And I'm sure you will already have guessed this because I mentioned scripts already, right? So the MCP server has tools. I, as the admin, as the developer, determine what those tools are, right? Like, nothing magic happening there. I determine, I name, create the tools, and then for each tool, I basically hook up an action on the back end. And the action could just be run a script, because the MCP server talks to FileMaker server through the data API and OData API, both of which are entirely capable of running scripts, right? So the MCP server will have the tool. I get to give it a name, give it a description, and determine what the action is, whether I just want to make an OData API call to basically find data that way or run a script. Both of these are available to me. So that script could just be go and approve this invoice. All right, so a little more detail about the stuff that you really need to know about these things. And one small caveat with this, right? So MCP is, I'm trying to think back. We were at the Engage conference in Austin, Texas, which would have been not quite this time of year, but close, right? Like it's about 12 months old. That's how old MCP is. We were at the conference when OpenAI, because Anthropic is the one that proposed the standards. And as like I said, the OpenAI, Anthropic, Cohere, all the other ones were all doing their own thing. And we were at the conference when OpenAI basically dropped a bit of a bombshell to say, we're going to stop building our own stuff and we're going to embrace what Anthropic has proposed. And that's to follow the MCP standard, which was a big deal, right? But fundamentally, we're still somewhere on this curve. And I'm not sure where we are, but certainly we're not at the plateau of productivity at any of this, right? So there's going to be a lot of variability, a lot of hype, but also a lot of disappointments potentially when you start to use this, when you go like, I thought this was going to be the best thing since sliced bread, and it isn't. Fundamentally, it's just a tool, right? And as any tool, it's as good as you make it. So be aware of that as you said about doing this stuff. All right, so to tie it a little bit together, MCP, Model Context Protocol. We already talked about the model. We know what that is. That's the thing that will ultimately be responsible for generating whatever the answer is to the question that was being asked. We covered protocol, which is just the way that the AI application, through its MCP client capabilities, knows how to speak MCP, understands the protocol. It can call an MCP server. It'll send the right request to the MCP server in the right format, and it can interpret whatever the MCP server sends back. So that's the model and the protocol taken care of. What we haven't talked about is context. All right, so the C there in MCP. So model, protocols, fine. Context. Think of context as, well, like I don't have a better description than what I put on the slide there, right? So it's everything that has happened up to that point in your interaction with the AI application. And that could be a bunch of resources that is available to the AI application, tools, right? That's anything that is actionable, and then prompts, which is really just the instructions that you write to make sure that your tools have a proper description, that the AI application knows what its role is and what to do, what not to do specifically. So context is all of these things. And while all three of these things are part of the MCP standards, we see a little more push towards resources these days, but fundamentally, it's really all about the tools that are created at the MCP server level, and how they're being used. There's a good analogy that I had there. It's almost like a pizza place, right? The tools is the action, right? That's do something, order a pizza. Where the resources is the things that are possible. That's all like think of it as the menu. Like, what pizzas can I order? And the prompts are the instructions that you give, where you say, from this menu, order me a pizza, but I want it well baked with a thin crust, delivered to my home address, whatever it may be, right? So those were the prompts. I don't want to oversimplify the complexity that comes with that, but that's one way of looking at these three things that are part of the MCP protocol. And I mentioned this, and I'll say it again, that all AI integrations are very much like API integrations. I'll give an example here for SSE. MCP has three different transport vehicles for talking to whatever the backend is. There's standard input-outputs. There's SSE, or server-side events. Maybe getting that one wrong, but Ian, correct me if I'm wrong. And then there's the third one. SSE, by the way, is already deprecated. It's only a year old, but it's already deprecated. I'll still show the example because it doesn't really matter whether it's SSE or streamable HTTP, which is the newest of those three vehicles. I really want to drive home the point that once you see it, it looks exactly like any other API stuff that you've done, right? So it's not that difficult. So the AI application, remember that screenshot from LibreChat where I'm going like there's like a little drop down, and when I pick the MCP server that I want to work with. So what really happens? And this is what I'm going to show you, right? So think you're the AI application and you're making a connection to the MCP server. It's just a curl like anything else. right? So it goes to that HTTPS endpoint where your MCP server is listening. In my case, it's localhost on 3000, doesn't really matter. And the MCP server will reply with just an HTTP response like you're used to from any other API, and it will say, "Hey, there's a messages endpoint there that you can use." Right? And then the AI application will use that messages endpoint to say, and this is JSON, like any other API integration that you've done, to say, here's some things that I want you to do. Right? This is sort of like the handshake. The MCP server will again respond in a very normal way, right? So this is the initialize the handshake that basically the clients and the MCP server will do that initial how are you, like what version of the language do you speak, that kind of thing. That's sort of like part of the handshake, and then the MCP server will reply back with its capabilities, right? So that's what it is. Then fundamentally, because this is the important one, the next call that the AI application will make to the MCP server is this one. Give me a list of tools that you have, right? So the MCP server, again, will respond in a very standard way, and it will give it a piece of JSON back with all of the tools that are available at that MCP server. And I'm sticking with the weather API thing. There's going to be a tool there called Get Weather. Right? And that has a description that says get current weather for a location. It'll also tell you when you call this tool, I expect you to follow this input schema, which is I need a location, right? Which could be a city name or a zip code. So the tool will describe what it needs so that when the AI application figures out based on what the user is asking for, that getting the weather is the thing that the user is asking for, it knows what to distill from what the user has given it to feed to this tool, right? So that's how it works. And then when the AI application makes a call to one of these tools, then that's what it looks like, right? So where it says the method is tools call, right? It tells the MCP server, I'm calling one of your tools, and by the way, it's the one with this name, right? And the name is from that list that the MCP server provided. MCP server responds and gives you a known bit of output to say, this is the current weather, right? Now the AI application can do something with that. So fundamentally, you will almost never be asked to put these things together, right? Any AI application that you will use will have the capabilities to write these kinds of exchanges already built in. I just wanted to show you that under the hood, there is no mystery. It's just the kind of stuff that you and I have been doing for the last 5 to 10 years, right? It's just another API integration. I can show you more details of the streamable HTTP, which is the one that replaces SSE, but fundamentally, it's really the same thing. So I'm not going to go into the same slides there, but for the streamable HTTP. But feel free to interrupt me if you want to see more of that stuff. The next thing is kind of critical, right? So we know we have an AI application. The AI application will take the user's input. Based on that input, will determine that a tool needs to be called, right? Where does the tool get executed? And you may be forgiven to think that it happens at the AI application level, but that's really not where that happens, right? The tool gets called and executed by the MCP server. That's the one that makes the call to, in our case, to FileMaker server, to the OData API, right? The MCP server will wait on the result for that and then channel that back into the AI application, right? But it's not the AI application that makes the direct connection to, say, our FileMaker solution. It really isn't. All that the AI application does is, based on the user's input, it says, I think I need to call a tool, let's call a tool. The MCP server is responsible for executing the tool. I'm going to spend just 1 minute on that. MCP does not make for agentic AI, right? There's a whole spectrum of workflow automation to agentic AI stuff. Think of it this way, right? A workflow automation is if something happens, then I will make something else happen. Whereas agentic AI is way more complex than that, right? Agentic AI is where you have different agents that can each reason, plan, make decisions, interact with each other, and take actions, right? Whereas a workflow automation is really more like a flow chart, right? Where you start at the beginning, there may be some decision points along the way, but it basically follows a straightforward flow. Agentic AI can be all over the place, but it's working towards a particular goal fairly independently. When I go to IKEA and I buy a kitchen, right? The kitchen will come with all of these pieces and it come with a manual. The manual is sort of like this the same as this if this then that, right? Because if I follow the manual and I don't hallucinate along the way, at the end of it, I'll have a working kitchen, or at least something that looks like it. And along the way, I may be picking up tools to get certain things done, right? So the simplistic kind of workflow automation doesn't preclude tools, right? The MCP has a place there. Whereas agentic AI is more like this, where I go and hire a contractor, and the contractor has a guy for plumbing, he has one for electricity, that kind of thing. And between themselves, they'll create a plan to build my kitchen, then build a kitchen, and at the end of the day, I'll have a kitchen. But will have done a lot more things autonomously that don't involve me. Right? Whereas on the left-hand side, that's me doing all the work. That's sort of like the distinction there between fairly straightforward flows, workflow automations, and agentic AI. And MCP can play a role in both of these, right? Like it doesn't mean one thing or the other. All right. I talked about the things that, yeah, I mentioned this. I don't want to belabor the point there a little bit, but still, this is kind of important. MCP is not just about getting access to your data, although that's going to be a big part of that. It's also getting access to your business logic. I don't know how many of you have played with the Claris MCP server, but the Claris MCP server exposes both direct data access to your tables. It can also do scripts, right? So why would you choose one over the other? And one of them is think about how your solution is built, right? If I build an invoicing solution, if I stick with the invoicing example, then an invoice as an object or as an entity probably will have multiple tables, right? I'll have an invoice table, an invoice line item table. There's going to be links to a product table. I'll have a customer table because the invoice is for a particular customer. And I may even have a pricing table hooked into that kind of stuff. Meaning that if I create an invoice, I'll need to have access to all of these tables, right? Or even modify an invoice or something like that. When I give an MCP server direct access to do actions on invoices, that means I now need to have access to all of these tables for it to have meaningful access to the invoice entity. I probably won't do that, right? I'll probably expose tools that are scripts, right? Because creating an invoice, and again, this goes back to the probabilistic nature of most interactions with these models. Creating an invoice, approving an invoice, modifying an invoice, that's a deterministic workflow. I want it to happen the same way every single time. And if you think about it, all the things we've ever done with our FileMaker solutions are deterministic, right? We created scripts that take an input, do stuff, and produce an output. That's deterministic because it happens the same way every single time. And I want that, right? I want my tools that I give to an AI model to be executed without, well, when it comes to business logic, that is, right? Without that uncertainty that comes with what is the model going to do with these tables, right? I don't want to be taking any chances there. So we have to keep this in mind, right? Like that really anything that a model does is just guessing at what needs to happen. And that extends to the tools that we expose to an MCP server, right? The fact that the tools exist and that the AI application knows that the tool exists doesn't mean that they will be used. Because there's still a determination that happens based on the input given by the user there's an interpretation that's going to happen whether tools need to be called. Right, so there is an aspect of it that you go like, I don't know that's going to happen, right? So that's something to keep in mind. So how does a model even know when to call a tool, right? And that really comes down to something that we mentioned a little bit there in the a couple of slides ago. That goes to writing the proper instructions, or AKA prompt engineering. Although instruction writing is the preferred term these days, it looks like. That's how we can maximize the chances of picking the right tool at the right time, right? It's really just about writing these instructions. I call it herding of cats, right? Because it's again, you're trying to put guardrails around trying to put guardrails around the probabilistic nature that is so fundamental to interacting with a model, right? So you're basically trying to shepherd it into one way or another way. And there's some best practices around that, right? So there's some things you must do, and there's some things that you shouldn't do when it comes to writing. And fundamentally, if you boil it all down, it comes to one thing: be as explicit as you can, right? Don't leave a lot of room for the model and the AI application to have to guess a lot about. It's already going to be guessing, but you want to be taking away a lot from the guessing that they do, right? So you'll be spending a lot of time doing this. And specifically when it comes to MCP, I mentioned we're going to have tools, right? Like, and this is a fancy tool. The name of the tool is obviously going to be important, right? Because it conveys meaning, but also the description, right? So you will have to spend some time writing stuff that makes it clear to the AI application that what the tool does. You also have access to the input schema. The input schema can also help determine or help the AI application make that determination. Is this the tool to call? Do I have enough information from the user's inputs to call that tool, right? Like in the weather API, if I say, what's the weather? Now there's a lot of room for interpretation. Like, what's the weather where? The obvious guess would be you probably mean where you are, but that's still a guess, right? So you can see where that's going with that, right? So by providing a good name and description and input schema, you can really help make that AI application make the right determination on what tool to call. And I mentioned the AI application itself will have what is called a system prompt, like a big guideline for what it is, why it even exists, what you expect from it, right? So, and then you have your tools with your tool descriptions and whatnot. And don't take this as gospel, right? But this is sort of like from where I sit, from having worked with this a little bit, that's sort of like the distinction between where I spend my focus, right? So between writing instructions at the server level versus writing instructions at the tools level. But it's fair to say that once you start putting this together, this is going to be where you spend a lot of time. And there's going to be a lot of iterations of this, right? Because you'll put your tool together, you'll give it a description, you'll give it a name, you'll provide the input schema, you'll put the overall system prompt together for your AI application, and then you'll start testing. And then your test may prove to be somewhat inaccurate. Then you'll go back to your tool descriptions, to your system prompt, and tweak it. Sometimes you'll make it better, sometimes you'll make it worse. But you can see where you'll be spending a fair bit of time in that process. So there's some best practices to putting these together, right? Like there's some things that models do well with when it comes to interpreting your instructions, right? So numbered list, lots of redundancy, like repeat yourself very often when you do these kinds of stuff. I went over that too quickly there. Let me do that again. Numbered lists and redundancy, right? So what you see there on the right-hand side of the screen is sort of like a good template of like sections to fill in as you put these things together, right? Where you very explicitly tell it things to do, things not to do, how to reason through things, like what decision tree to follow. If you have some examples, by all means include them, right? Because those will be good things for the AI application to know what it needs to do. This screenshot is from the Claris MCP server. This is a tool. This is, for instance, an actual tool description that I have for one tool that reaches out into FileMaker to basically retrieve the data definition layer, or DDL, that FileMaker can do. FileMaker has a get table DDL function that is in the AI features there. So if I want to create a tool that is exposed to an MCP server that really will go and grab the DDL from FileMaker, then this would be a good description there of the description for the tool, right? So that the AI application knows what is it that I'm going to get when I run this tool? Like, why would I run this tool? So that's a tool description there. I have another tool for natural language query, or NLQ. That is a lot more involved, but it will look something like this, right? I don't expect you to read this and absorb all of this. I really want to convey that there is a lot to it, right? A lot of explicit things and all the things that I just mentioned there, right? So I wanted to show you this as an example of how elaborate some of these things. I don't say these things to sort of scare you away from that. I'm just saying from experience, it's actually fun writing these things, but from experience, know that this is ahead of you when you start going into these things. You will spend some time working on these things. Equally important is your tool is going to return a result. Same as with all of the instructions that you write on why the tool should be called and how the tool should be called, you have to be equally as descriptive in what to do with the results that your tool gives back, right? So there too, you have a description, you have an output schema that you basically define in the JSON that I'm going to send back, expect these elements, right? And then at the application level, again, you can write prompts that will help interpret how the AI application should now work with what you provide back to the AI application as a result of your tool. So, for instance, in my get DDL description here, I have this section that deals explicitly with that, right? Where it says this is what it returns, so that the AI application knows what to do with that. In a FileMaker script, because I mentioned most of the MCP tools that are linked to things that exist in my FileMaker solution, for me, it's largely going to be scripts, right? So you can do something like that where on line 28 there, the script will exit with a very explicit response. The response is going to be JSON. And in there, I can say there's going to be some data in there, but also an instruction, like where I say visualization suggestion, where I say, like, with this, then maybe do a data table or do a pie chart with this, right? So as a developer, I have control over how, when this tool is called, when this FileMaker script is called, how that data that I provide back is going to be shown back in the AI application, right? So you have some control over that you can do there. Right. So MCP server, we've been talking about MCP server as if it was a singular entity. That's almost never going to be the case, right? So this is the better way to go. And you may go like, but why not this, right? One MCP server that is hooked up to FileMaker and my accounting system and my help desk like ServiceNow or whatever, and each of those can be exposing their own tools, right? So on the FileMaker side, this could be a couple of scripts, that kind of thing. Same on the accounting side, right? There's logic that I can do that could be exposed to an MCP server, right? So the reason that this is not the better approach, but that having multiple MCP servers is the better approach, is that the more tools that you expose through a single MCP server, the easier it is for the AI application to get confused. Because in essence, you're giving it too many options, right? So it's better to basically have dedicated MCP servers for a specific domain. And in our case, accounting would be an MCP server, right? Help desk functionality would be an MCP server. Whatever we have on the FileMaker side would be an MCP server. And each of those would then only expose a limited number of tools. And then there's obvious benefits. So if I go back to here, right? So this is the better way of doing that. I get other benefits, right? Separation of concerns. I can iterate on any of those separately. I can set my privileges and authorizations differently. So this is a better way. So, and it's also where MCPs, as they talk to AI application, where it really shines is having access to a multitude of backend systems, right? Not just FileMaker, but also the other things. Because now data from all of these systems can be aggregated, correlated. AI models are really good at finding patterns, right? So if you can give it data from different systems, now we can find patterns across data from different systems, right? So that's the kind of stuff that we could probably script in FileMaker if we really had to, but AI models are really so good at that, right? So that's the kind of stuff that we want to give to AI applications. And the more systems we can expose to it, the better that'll go. All right. I'll get past this slide here. All right. No, I'll skip to this one. So a couple of things to watch out for. Data and intellectual property. This doesn't mean internet protocol, but IP is intellectual property. We've talked about this in other venues as well. When you integrate with an AI model server, you have an AI application, and say for the sake of the discussion that you're inside FileMaker and you're integrating with an AI model server, whatever you send there is actual data that you send, or intellectual property, right? So your schema, for instance, like your list of tables, your list of fields. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm not saying don't use OpenAI, don't use Cohere, don't use Anthropic. I'm saying know what you're doing, right? When you send data somewhere, that data physically gets sent somewhere, right? So it's not yours anymore. It's a copy of your data that gets sent somewhere. So you get to decide together with your clients how big of a concern that is, right? But at the very least, it should be a conversation, right? We should be thinking about that. So the same applies with an MCP server, right? The tool calling to the MCP server is just that. That's just executing a tool by name. The MCP tool will interact with your FileMaker system, will very likely bring back some data. The MCP server is just a pass-through, right? It doesn't do any processing. It basically waits for FileMaker to be done with the data API call, collects the data, sends it off to the AI application. But data flows through it. Whether the data gets logged there or not, that really depends on who wrote the MCP server. So there's a level of trust there that needs to be had. If you don't want to use Claris AI, the Claris MCP server, you can roll your own, right? And if we have time, I can quickly show you one that I built that does the same thing, because they're not that hard to put together, MCP servers. But so be aware of that, right? Number of tools, I mentioned that. The fewer tools, the better. Fewer tools means that the AI application is less likely to get confused about what's there. And then we got to think about performance a little bit, right? So there's the FileMaker specific thing, because we already know by now that the MCP server is going to call FileMaker through the OData API. So you're going to get the speed and the performance that you get from the OData API. A lot of that is going to be determined by how your FileMaker solution is designed, like the architecture choices you made in the past, the amount of data that you have, that kind of thing, right? So keep that in mind. So there's nothing magical about the MCP stuff. It's just an OData API call, right? So good or bad, it is what it is. So keep that in mind when you set out to if you expect sub-second responses from the user typing a question in a chat experience, making a connection to your FileMaker database and back, that's not going to happen. Right? So that's just something to be aware of. And of course, when I say, but also in general, I mean, in one of my early slides, I mentioned you have your AI application, your AI model server, and your MCP server, which are typically 3 different entities hosted on 3 different things. There's going to be the usual latency between all of those things, right? So if you deploy them all on-prem, you don't have to deal with the latency all that much. But if you're using commercial providers for each one of those, it is a factor to be aware of. And then the notion of context crowding, right? So what I mean by that is, and I'm using LM Studio as an example here, and this is the open source OpenAI model, the 20 billion parameter one, not the huge one. What the arrows on the right-hand side point at is the size of the context for that model. Every model has a context, a size of context, right? So this one has 131,000 tokens. A token is not a character, a token is not a word, it's something in between. I believe this is the equivalent of 500, 600, 700 pages of text, something like that. But the main point is it has a limited context. The more you stuff in that context, the longer your conversation, the more verbose your instructions are going to be, because all of your instructions, the tool definitions, the system prompt, the question that you ask, the conversation up to that point, all of that stuff goes into context. At some point, your AI application with your model is going to run out of context, right? It's at that point that it starts forgetting stuff. Now, a lot of modern AI applications are building in some like extra memory where it can keep track of some of the other things, but it is a thing, right? If you've ever done a lot of vibe coding and you have extended vibe coding sessions, you will have come to that point where all of a sudden, like what you just done an hour ago is totally forgotten, right? And that's because of this thing, the context crowding. And I just finished saying that you have to be very explicit in your instruction writing, and that means typically your instruction writing is going to be very verbose. This is the downside of that, right? So there's a balance that we'll have to strike between the length of all the instructions that we have, be it as tool descriptions or as system prompts and all of that good stuff, and what the AI application through the model can support as context. Right? Commercial providers have bigger context windows than this one, typically like at least double the size of that one. But then you have the other considerations to make, right? Do I really want to be sending my intellectual property and data there, right? So compromises, right? So keep that in mind. So, and this is one of my last slides, I think. Yep. So I wanted to summarize a couple of things here that come out of having worked with this a little bit. There are a bunch of new skills that we'll need to develop when we set out to talk about things, and when we talk about it with our customers, and then when we're asked to put some things together there for our customers. One of them is those deployment options. Commercial providers, non-commercial providers. If commercial providers are out, what does that mean, right? Do we know how to set up everything locally? An AI application like LibreChat, an AI model server like the Claris one, or LM Studio, or Olama, or any of the other choices, right? So an on-prem MCP server, what does that look like? So there's a bunch of deployment stuff that we'll need to get familiar with that will get us there. This is a big one because we've seen this come back and bite a few times already in AI projects that we've done for our clients. The client's data may not be in a proper state for asking a lot of AI-based questions out of it. And this is not necessarily specific to AI. It's the same for any business intelligence tools that you want to let loose on data, right? So keep in mind there may be some data cleanup that needs to be done before exposing clients' data to any kind of AI workflows. And then there's the big one, right? Once we start asking questions of our data and our solution through AI, how do we know that the answers are accurate and that they remain accurate over time? So this whole thing of validation, verification. There's a lot of frameworks coming out. We'll have to be able to pick a framework, get proficient with a framework, so that we can automate the testing around that. So that's a skill. And then I mentioned this one already, instruction writing, right? So that's probably one of the early ones that you'll come across when you set out to do these things. You'll have to be able to write good tool descriptions, good system prompts, right? To really make sure that the AI application knows what to do, when to do it, and do it well without guessing too much. So there's a bunch of stuff there to go over. Yeah, I'm just going to take 5 more minutes because I know, and this was my concern early on, like this is a lot of conceptual theoretical stuff, right? But I think it's crucially important that we get through sort of that learning curve initially and be able to internalize all of these concepts. I do want to show you, however briefly, oh, by the way, this is LibreChat, right? So this runs locally on my machine here. I like the on-prem stuff, right? Because because of that deployment skill stuff, I want to be able to know how to do this. I'm not going to be dogmatic about this to say every deployment needs to be all-prem because of scaremongering with security and privacy, but it is something that I take seriously, and that means I need to know how to do these things properly, right? So MCP server, I can just pick my MCP server. This is going to fail. Well, it's not going to fail. I'm not going to do that. I said that I was going to do something else. This is an MCP server that I built on my own, again, because I want to be able to run this locally. This works very similar to how the Claris MCP server works, right? Where the Claris MCP server works exactly the same way. You're inside the MCP server at this point, and this is me as the FileMaker developer, as the admin. I need to define tools, which means that the first thing I need to do is I need to point it to one of my FileMaker servers. So when I do that, what really happened here behind the scenes is my MCP server is going to make an OData API call to my FileMaker server using the metadata OData API. This is not magic. This is something that is already, it has been in the OData API for a bit. But this will tell me you have these files available, right? And if I pick one, I now have to provide credentials. And again, these are FileMaker credentials, right? Not server credentials. This is, can I make a connection to this particular file? Pardon all the flashing that happens there. So I picked a file. Behind the scenes, my MCP server, and the same with the Claris MCP server, now made another OData API call, another metadata call to that particular file, so that I get the metadata back to say what scripts, what tables do I have, right? And that's how these scripts get now be exposed as potential tools. So each script that you have in your FileMaker solution is the potential for being a tool. And for each of those, because they're not configured, they're just a list of scripts at this point. For each of those, I can now say I will expose that script as a tool if I enable it, and I can give it a description. I can provide parameters which then define what script parameters, input schema that I talked about, that the AI tool, when it calls my MCP server to say, execute this tool by this name, you got to provide me these script parameters, right, as the input schema that is going to happen there, right? So in essence, and this is not going to save, I don't think. Well, actually, it did. And, yep. And I have this tool here. I went to the tools. So scripts is just a list of scripts, right? Connections, that's just a list of the files. But the tools, once I've picked a script and I've enabled it in my MCP server, now it has become a tool. Now, if my AI application, through those API things that I've shown, asks my MCP server for a list of tools, then this one will be part of that tools that is now available at that MCP server. If the AI application determines that it's good to call this tool, then this tool will be called. by extension, my FileMaker script will get called, right? So that's how it works. It's nothing fancy. It all really works off of the OData API and a little bit of the data API to get the list of the scripts, but it's all OData API in the backends, right? So not a lot of magic happening with the MCP server. It just basically gathers information about your FileMaker solution, whether it's direct access to tables or running scripts, and then packages them so that when somebody comes calling and speaks MCP, that it can say, here's my JSON list of tools and the descriptions, have at it, right? That's fundamentally how that works. All right, that was a lot. So feel free to follow up by email, any conversation that you want to have around this. This is important. So happy for me to come back and show you a lot more of the practical stuff at any point. So,
Definitely,
any questions?
definitely. Well, we'd love you to come back and show some of the practical stuff. That was fascinating. And yes, I'm sure there'll be lots of people contacting you. It's yeah, really clearly explained as well. It's I've learned a lot. I reached a point where I don't think I could take any more this evening, but I did learn a lot.
I think that's
kind
the
of
thing I got from it. It was really clear. So really clear, explained a load of things that I wasn't clear of the methodologies and the technologies behind it. So it's understanding those workflows, how things talk to each other. There's a couple of assumptions I made there, which you then said, well, actually, no, it's not the AI model that's calling you. It's the MCP server that does the work and does the call. I would have naturally gone the other way around and gone, well, it's got to be the application that makes that call, not the MCP server. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Beverly's got a hand raised.
Yes.
yeah, that's wonderful. I loved it. And out of it, I got really clearly in my brain is it's going to take a human intelligence to make the artificial intelligence work okay. So we haven't been lost in all of this. We're still needed.
Absolutely, right? Because this is not letting AI loose, because it's going to make all the wrong choices, right? So putting those guardrails, those instructions, and that's why they are so crucial, right? I'm working on a project right now that has both a RAG and internal FileMaker database, and I was asking this is all about devices. I was asking the question how many iPads that I have, and apparently I had a document in my RAG database that describes how many iPads we had, but I wanted it to read the data from the FileMaker database, not from the RAG database. So it was a correct answer. It was just a wrong answer because it was looking in the right thing. So I had to go back and figure okay, how do I write an instruction around this so that it goes to FileMaker for the answer and not my RAG database, right? So that's just one example of where we really need to know our stuff, know the domain, so we can guide the AI to the right stuff.
Absolutely. Has anyone else got some comments or questions they want to put now? I don't know if are you hanging around till the virtual bar, Wim, or have you got to head off?
I'll be here for the next half an hour, then I have a meeting.
Okay. So probably if anyone's got any other questions now, we'll try and get them in. Otherwise, we'll get Wim back again for sure.
Anytime.
Thank you. That was, as I say, brilliant.
Just-
Go
If I
on.
could just say I'm going to be speaking on Wednesday at the Claris partner, the UK Claris partner meeting, giving sort of a fairly brief intro. So it's a different presentation to Wim's, but kind of covering some of the same ground from a slightly different angle. So
Well, that's going to be well worth listening to.
on
Yeah.
Wednesday.
I think since we're slightly over time, thank you very much, Wim. We'll move on to the news. Gary, I'm about to post that file in the chat. There it is.
Good, thank you. That's
So
fine.
the news file is in the chat now.
Quick run on the news, and before Wim goes, I just want to mention this. AI does get things wrong. I was doing a compound calculation with XLOOKUP and data and some other bits and pieces in a formula. I asked the questions. It came back with some ideas. I said, no, I'm using Google Sheets on that. And he says, oh, Google Sheets doesn't have XLOOKUP. really? Really? Are you sure? So I just wanted to mention that. It's just like, right, the news. I will continue quickly through the news. This is provided by Penny, and who does a fabulous job. The link is in the chat. It's also going to be posted on the website as well. But there's a couple of things I wanted to mention. There's one that was mentioned and brought up, which was basically there's Tahoe and updates to that, and the pain and problems it's caused from a UI perspective. It's got some issues. You either love it or hate it. I think most of the community doesn't particularly love it. So do bear that in mind. Have a look at this article because it mentions in what FileMaker's done to address some of these issues. Like a major one was FileMaker Go crashes when printing via AirPrint. So that's got a major issue. The issue has been resolved, but you've got to be updating. So if you're not running the later versions of FileMaker, you're going to fall into some of these problems. Just be careful when you deploy this stuff because the users are going to update their machines and then you're going to say, oh, well, FileMaker's not working. So you're going to be in a lot of pain if you just let them willy-nilly update their OSs. So just bear that in mind. The next one on the list that I've pulled from here is prioritizing the FileMaker development, the QOL enhancements. This is something that got posted by Claris that was, it's their priority list that they're doing, and they're doing a great thing doing the community exposure. They're pushing this out to people to then vote of their, as they called it, their low-hanging fruit that they are going to try and push into next builds, updates, and so forth. And this was a post where you could vote for the list. The list was this, which was exposed, and people could then go and order that list. And I assume Claris will then look at that and with development time, we'll go through that in those orders and go, right, in the next point release version, you might get permanent scrolling of non-enterable read-only fields. I don't know whether you're going to get that or you're not going to get that. It depends how complicated it is, but I thought it's a nice way of what Claris are doing, trying to interact with us and saying, right, actually, we'll push it out to the community and let them decide what the order is. We're going to get through these things eventually. Let's try and put it in the order that makes the biggest benefit to people.
And also, you can vote twice or as many times as you like.
So this is where AI comes back into it, and you can have it vote hundreds of times for you. The other one is developer access without full access. So this is one personally to heart that I like and I also hate. My point is, read the article. It's quite a lengthy document and it needs to be for a reason. If you're exposing yourself to circumvent the level of access to your database and you're not full access and you haven't got full access privilege, you need to bear that in mind. How are you going to do that? How are you going to expose that? And how are you going to make that work? There's nothing wrong with this. This is perfectly safe. Just read the instructions, follow the exposure that it's doing. There's some security aspects to it that you need to be aware of, but it's certainly one that I take to heart, and it's various things that FileMaker is starting to do to try and make that on those bigger solutions when you've got multiple people having to go into systems, you can then elevate that privilege set without giving full access. It's a nice feature. I'm not saying it's a bad one, but just be careful with it and be mindful about how you're going to set that up within your solutions. That's all. The other one, which I didn't know, and this is a mention to Wim because I didn't know this, the assisted install file. I didn't realize you could put, because you've got different, I knew you had different instructions for the different platforms. I didn't realize you can create one assisted install file that has all the language and all the terminology from Linux to Windows to Mac OS. And FileMaker cleverly just ignores the stuff that doesn't meet that OS that is running. I thought it was genius. I didn't realize that was the case. So as Wim mentioned on there, on the full article, there's stuff where you can say how you treat file name, lengths, and so forth within the Windows platform. You can set that in the install file to tell FileMaker how to handle those. If you're installing on the Linux server, I assumed you have to have then a Linux file, a Windows file, and a Mac file. You don't. You can have one big file, deploy it on any server you like, and it follows your methodology for your assisted install. So it's a brilliant feature, that. Thank you, Wim. That's great. So, and then this came out from the support group. They looked at the community and they put out a post to themselves, basically, and an internal discussion they were having. And it was about those 2025 top 5 features. There will be some in here that I think are absolutely obvious, and there's some in here that I was thinking, okay, maybe I can see where they're going with it. But here is the list. AO integration is number 1. Why wouldn't it be? It should be, absolutely. Claris Studio's up there, I think, for what they're trying to do. Claris with the platform was clever. I don't think they've got a full execution to get that to fully where it needs to be yet, but it's close. It's getting there. And I think number 3, I thought, was get record IDs from a file set. That's a game changer. That's a game changer for everyone. Anyone that does any sort of development is going to start using that. I thought that was just genius. And then you can't ignore the JSON stuff and the speed improvements, because we're all using that technology to this day. So pat on the back to Claris for then addressing these for 2025. I think it's a decent list. I think it's fine. So I'm sure you've got your own top 5 that is not even in this list. One of them will be get the MonkeyBread software and get the plugin for that, because that is just genius. I think there's so many features in that as well. And then I just want to thank Penny, because this is a summary of the news this session. There is a lot of news. There's a lot of information she's pulled together. So honestly, special thanks to Penny for doing this, because I wouldn't be able to do this session without her. So a lot of effort, a lot of work goes into that. And then we mentioned this earlier, but this was pulled literally from Christian's site about half an hour ago. So I think it's up to date now. It should be. But this is the training events for 2026. So this is the current list where we are. The link is at the bottom. Always go there to that, and his system live updates. So if you want to know what's going on in the FileMaker world and community globally, go there. It's definitely the point of reference. So, and I said I'd keep the news quick. News links will be posted on the FMBug website, which they will be. And there's more discussions in the virtual bar. I'm done. So.
Great. Thanks, Gary.
No
and
worries.
yes, definitely reinforcing those thanks to Penny for all the hard work she puts in.
I will.
Creating the news. In which case, we'll move on swiftly. Kate, if you're ready.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Yul, and thanks to Wim and Gary. That was awesome. I'm just really happy to be here at this meetup. I really love this meetup, so thank you for having me here. I'm going to be speaking about image recognition in FileMaker. And I'm doing something a little bit different. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to be showing a lot of things on my screen, and I actually have this document, and it's a publicly shared document, and this is kind of my outline of what I'm going to talk about, but it has some helpful links in it. So I'm going to just post it in the chat so people can follow along, and also have this as an artifact to help you later on. So let me make sure I'm sharing with everybody here.
Yep, got it.
Okay. So, so this presentation is really based primarily off of 2 blog posts that I wrote, or in a blog series, which is about AI image recognition in FileMaker. So I have the link to those 2 blog posts there, and I'm still going to share my screen because I still have a lot of things I need to share, and then you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to share top. Okay, so those are the two blog posts. A little bit about me. I know most of you already, of course, but for those of you that I don't know, I'm Kate Waldhauser. I am the founder of a company called Violet Beacon. And Violet Beacon is a Claris partner, which it says down there somewhere that now I've lost the place. But we're also heavily working in responsible AI. And what that means is helping people build strategy and governance around AI, and companies to kind of make the right decisions. Because as Wim talked about, there's like 1,000 decisions to be made, right? And Beverly, I appreciate your comment about the human intelligence, because I keep a blog, and the blog is called Human Intelligence, because I do strongly believe we need our human intelligence as part of artificial, like we can't have it one without the other, right? Obviously. So that's the blog, and that's a little bit about me. But what this presentation is really going to cover is, I want to kind of talk about the elements of what is involved in when dealing with images in FileMaker, and specifically around the tools that are available natively in FileMaker. Of course, with insert from URL, there's a whole new door is opened. There's many more options. And again, to kind of piggyback on what Wim was saying, right, this is really as simple as API calls, right? And in one way to think about it. So if you have been using API calls, you're used to that, the structure shouldn't come off as incredibly different from that, but the elements of choosing a model, setting up a model, that's where the complexity can get into place. So then I'm going to actually go into, talking a little bit about the model, also about vision models in general, right? So that's something we're not talking so much about in FileMaker because a lot of it has to do with natural language search and generate response from model, which is language. And I'm going to talk a little bit about vision models and what they are and the different classifications there. And then I'm going to kind of show you, the FileMaker integration and talk about the gotchas and best practices, because there's a lot that you need to know to set this up the right way to get the results you want to get. I'm not going to talk about emerging trends in AI image recognition, but then we'll have Q&A. So, I mean, this is the obvious, first part is like, why would you want image search in FileMaker? And I feel like this, you don't even have to read the paragraph, right? Like images are so powerful, right? Because you can see from this user interface, it's like, oh, I want to take an image and I want to find the ones that are closely matched, right? So I think this is valuable for any FileMaker client that has a large inventory of images in many different areas. It could be manufacturing, it could be retail, it could be art, and that they want to be able to pull something up, or maybe it's a customer interface to be able to pull something up and find closely related items. So again, it's something that we can't do with text, right? So this is straight vision. In what I'm talking about in the examples that I'm talking about. But here are just some other examples. So this is, the kind of use cases that could be useful for somebody with a FileMaker solution that wants to build this. And then talking about, the technical foundations. So we hear the word embedding, right? We've been hearing this for a while now from Claris, as this was like the very start, the first feature that they rolled out in relation to anything having to do with AI. Vectors, right? That might be another word that's familiar, right? So it's basically, and again, like this goes back to high school, should be high school, college algebra, right? We should have been learning this stuff. So it's like refreshing back on that. But it's that series of numbers, right? It's an array of numbers that's going to represent what like a photo of a golden retriever might look like. And a photo of a husky would have a different set of numbers. And then we use cosine similarity. Again, just finding the, I guess it's the difference between those two vectors, right? So, or the degree of similarity, right? It's an angle. And that's always somewhere on the scale of 0 to 1. So, I mean, I find it's helpful to think of it as a percentage, right? So it's like, if it's a 98%, that's a high match. If it's 50% low match, I think of it that way. And then there's this concept called normalization. And I don't want to go into too much detail and get too super technical because I don't think we really need to understand the normalization. It's just that I'm finding it's best practice to just always use the normalize embedding function when you get an embedding from a model, because in FileMaker, using the cosine similarity function is going to expect that the embeddings are normalized. And normalized just basically has to do with the way, if you were to add up all those numbers within the array, that you would have, the length, I guess, the addition of all those numbers would be around 1. And don't quote me on this, I'm not exactly, a math major in this, but from what I understand and from how I'm using it, like that's the best answer that I have when I'm working with it. And I found that, just always normalizing the embedding vectors gets me closer to the answer that that I need to have. So about the model, okay, so we're talking about vision models. And let me back up for a second. So when you're creating an embedding, the model has to have a way to kind of identify what's in there. So for that, we're needing, a type of vision model. So just to kind of review some of the other types of vision models, right? There's a classification, and going back into the idea of the input and output, right, with a model. So if you input a single image, with a classification model, it could output like a class label like cat and a confidence score, so how accurate it is. So we're going to be getting a different type of output. You can also have an object detection model, which might have, a class label, bounding box. So it's going to actually be able to look at that image and tell you what's in it and where it is. Segmentation, and then embedding, that's the one I have highlighted because, of course, that's the type of vision model that we want, where we can upload an image and the return will be this vector or this embedding. There's also key point detection, right, is going to return coordinates of key points. Generative, of course, that's what we're using with, AI when we want to generate a new image. OCR, so, with the get live text function in FileMaker, I believe it's reliant on the OCR model built into your iPhone, right? So there's the ways that like we're using some vision models already and maybe aren't quite aware of it. Depth estimation, video analysis. So again, like there's a lot out there. And one clarification I wanted to make, between embedding models and classification models, because I think those are pretty close, is that when it's really about the output that you're getting, right? Is that the output is going to be in this numerical value versus, the output is going to be cat, dog, car. So it's actually, it's a completely valid other way of image recognition. It's just in the case of what we're wanting to use this for, which is comparing two images, we need the vectors, and then we're doing cosine similarity. So we're just using the math. So you'll notice clip, OpenAI VIT model. So, and I'll get into this, I think, in the next section here, but about what that exactly is. But I'm clip is important to know because it's the only current model, let's see, that's available in a model category, let's say, that's available within the native insert embedding script step in FileMaker. So again, like opening up the door using insert from URL, we have a lot more options. So some of the best practices, are again normalizing embeddings, choosing the right model, pre-processing the images, making sure they're the same size, using pre-trained models, and there is the option of combining models. Again, like this gets into a little bit more complex stuff, and what I'm going to demo is just going to be the FileMaker stuff, but I just wanted to kind of let people know that there are a whole other variety of options, right? If vision model is something that your FileMaker application can benefit from, that there's a lot of other ways to take advantage of it. So I wanted to look at, and this has to do with, so in the first part of the series, this is where I'm kind of going through the steps of picking a model and hosting it on your server. And so here, and this comes, let me see, this comes preloaded into your FileMaker server AI services. So when you, which is, okay, let me back up for 1 second. So if you're wanting to deploy this, really because we're limited by what FileMaker Pro is giving us the ability to integrate with. And because we're limited by this, by basically a couple of models, right? So ClipVit B32 is one of the models. And if you have downloaded FileMaker, if you're running FileMaker server and you're running AI services, right? So you will see these models that are already kind of come pre-installed. And I'm skipping over the steps for actually, setting up AI services, because I think it's going to be a little bit outside the scope of this. And I know Wim has some really great articles and a white paper on this, because there's really a lot that you're going to want to know about in terms of, hosting your own model. The tricky part is because with the vision models, with the image embedding models and the way that FileMaker has it currently working, we have to use an open source model, right? So that's kind of the catch-22 with this feature currently. Cohere is listed as one of the cloud-based models that's available, right? From in the options under the FileMaker setup AI account. But the problem, and Cohere has a multimodal embedding model. Multimodal would be another word for a combination of text and image in the same space. And you can actually use it and it will generate an embedding for you. But the problem is that embedding is only embedding the name of the file. So you might do something like this, where you have two pictures completely different, same file name, and you might get a really high similarity. And then you have two identical pictures, different file name, low similarity. So don't be fooled. Even though you can technically generate embeddings with Cohere, they're not going to embed what you want them to embed. And this is where it is kind of tricky, because once I generate an embedding, it just looks like this, right? So I can't, looking at this, I have no idea what that is. And that's what's kind of the interesting part. So we have to do some sort of evaluation, right? In order to make sure that I know that this is going to return a picture that looks similar to that. Without that knowledge, it can get really confusing. And so figuring that out about Cohere, and Claris has made this clear, it's not one of their officially approved models. But when something, you can actually generate an embedding, you actually then have to verify that that's accurate. So going with some of the pre-approved models is, of course, the safest way, because you don't have to leave anything up to chance. So we've got, these are the three models that are, kind of out of the box compatible. So it's ClipVit B32, ClipVit L14, and ClipVit B32 multilingual V1. I wanted to kind of break apart the parts of a model, because I think this is really helpful. It helps me in kind of getting a better understanding of what I'm dealing with. Sometimes model names are just a lot of information, like I don't, kind of strung together, right? And I could say I don't think there's a hard and fast code to all of this yet. There's different codes for different types of models. You'll see different naming conventions. Again, like I think it's a little bit across the board. So what I'm talking about now is specifically kind of in the vision realm. But so when you see the word clip, what that means is contrastive language image pre-training. So this was actually technology that was developed by OpenAI. So this model, ClipVit B32, is technically an OpenAI model, but it's not one of their paid models. It's an open source model. I think they released it in 2021, and it was kind of one of the new of the kind. What clip really means is it's about the training methodology that went into this. So what they used was image and caption pairs, basically, to do this training, right? And so because the goal of the training was to then be able to upload an image and kind of a zero shot classification, or a zero shot way of saying, oh, I know what this is. So there's different ways, again, that these models have been trained, a whole variety. And this one has to do with image caption pairs, and also connecting. And what that did was connect, right? So there's the language component and then the image component. So it's the same space. And one thing about this is it's not really a strict vision model, because with Clip, we can also search by text. So I can type in the word, horse, and then it'll also be able to search the embedding. So it works in both, it combines text and image in the same plane. So they're kind of working together, which makes it really powerful. In this case of how I'm using it the language component isn't really necessary unless I wanted to be able to search by text. And then the B stands for base. So this is, the VIT, that stands for Vision Transformer, and that's the architecture that's used in this model. And then the B is for base. So, as we'll look at a different model, we can kind of compare. But the base model is kind of the medium-sized one. You can find then there can be tiny or smaller ones, and then large ones, huge ones. And then 32, so that's the patch size. So with clip and this type of model, the way that the image is processed to create the embedding is it's done by pixels, right? So 32 refers to the size. So it's a 32 by 32 pixel patch for processing. So if I had a much bigger pixel size, like 200 by 200, well, then that would be a much bigger part of the picture. That would be, less divisions of my my image would be generated or analyzed, I guess you could say. So this is what, this is kind of what you do if you break down what is clip-bit B32. And maybe that's too much information, and but I find it really interesting. This is a model card. So when you go to Hugging Face, and again, this is the way that the AI server in FileMaker works, is it's, you would go to Hugging Face to actually find the model that you want to download. And so being able to kind of read a model card is helpful, because the kind of things that you need to know in order to find a model that's compatible is what kind of task it can do. So this one is sentence similarity. And sentence similarity, even though it says sentence, it doesn't necessarily mean it's for text only. So that also, sentence similarity also covers images. So it's a little bit historical, but it's important to know that sentence similarity isn't just a text. Similarity, again, has to do with the cosine similarity, so the embeddings. There's also, so if you go to models, oops, hold on. If you go to models and you look under tasks, right? So this is like all the different tasks that the models can do. There is one called image feature extraction. So these types of models that can extract image features, again, would be able to extract embeddings for models, but these ones won't work out of the box with your AI FileMaker server. And this is where I mean is like, you can take this in a whole different direction and host your own model and use insert from URL to communicate with any model out there. And there's really, it's a whole wide world, right? So it's just like opening up all these different APIs. And there's a number of things to learn, and I don't want to, it's really hard to kind of rein this in, because I want to touch and let people know that these things are available, but I don't want to go too far or too deep. But just, if you are curious about learning more about image models and how to use them, especially from Hugging Face, just reach out to me, because I'd love to have that conversation with people. So like I said, yes, those are the three models. The problem with Cohere. So the second step in, using FileMaker would be to go ahead and download and host the model. So that's using the AI services here, which again, like these are already going to be preloaded, so you shouldn't have to do anything. But like you can see here, I found, so there's some other models. These are from Hugging Face. These are kind of like fine-tuned versions of the ClipVit L14, ClipVit B32. Oh, let's break this one apart. So ClipVit L14, L is for large and 14 is the patch size. So you're going to get a lot more detail recorded in each image if you're using this model. So these ones are, again, kind of fine-tune, there are fine-tuned models that you can use based off of the foundation model of the ClipVit B32 or ClipVit L14. And those you can go ahead and use. So the way I found those, just to show you, so I searched by sentence similarity, and then I just filter by clip, and then for ClipVit, and then these ones that are available. So again, like there's different ways to kind of get to know and understand how to use Hugging Face, how to look for models, if you're interested in learning more about that. And back to the server, so it's again, downloading the model, adding a key, and that's really the two pieces that you'd need to get started. So back in your FileMaker solution, you have to create fields for images and embedding vectors. You need a clearly label of the model used, consistent size of image, security and schema best practices. So in my FileMaker solution, I have a table for my images, and then I have a table called image embeddings, so that I can actually keep one different image embeddings per image, right? So this one's in here twice, but you can see that for this image, I have this embedding for this model, this embedding for that model, right? I can create as many different embeddings as I want to. And then you can see, just based off of the file name, this is the file name of the embedding. And you can also view it in text. So you can view it two ways, depending on depending on the function you use in FileMaker, although best practice is to always store your embeddings in container fields. So this is in a container field. But something that's really, interesting is, so looking at the file name, you can obviously tell, okay, this is a different model because the file name is named differently. So without having to look at the numbers, you can tell the difference between them. I'm also recording the number of dimensions, right? So that's the number of actually values in the array. So this is 512. L14 is 768. But then in this column, I have the thumbnail. So let me just zoom in real quick. So what I did is I created a thumbnail. So this is the main image, right? That's the image size. And then I created a thumbnail of it. And then I created an embedding. And you can tell, again, like it's going to be a different embedding. It's going to have its own values in that. And I think it's okay, but I think the point that it brings up for me is that you have to be consistent about your image sizing, right? If you want to get consistent results. So just putting any image in there, if half of your images are embedding or thumbnails and half are, full size, you're going to get inconsistent results. And this is where, again, like kind of back to what Wim said, like having good data, right? So this is going to be like the clean data process in order for the AI to work with it. So not even with natural language or text generation models, we're just dealing with embedding models, and there has to be a consistency in there. So that's one aspect. I am, like I said, storing the embeddings in their own file or their own table, and using, even though these images are, or the embeddings are just a series of numbers, I think you still, for security best practices, making sure that they're only accessible to the right people, right? Using record level access, because so even if somebody, somebody that you didn't want to have access to this picture, you also wouldn't want to give them access to the embedding, because somebody then could go and, do something to read that embedding using a different software. So that's just, best practices. I think labeling, right? That was the other aspect, is so being sure when you create an embedding, labeling, okay, which model did I use to create this? Because if you don't label it later on, you're going to just have no idea. So that's another essential part that's not built into FileMaker, right? We have to make sure that we are using the architecture to do this. So then the next step is generating the embeddings. So that's going to be, you know, the script that that just will go ahead and create all of these embeddings. That is going to be something you're going to probably run like one bulk, right? Because if you're dealing with a data set that's been existing for a period of time, okay, we're going to run a bulk, and then using some sort of, you know, script trigger or part of the workflow so that every time a new image is added, the embeddings are created for it. And I'll just show you, yeah, for my AI image embedding script. So always having to initialize the model ahead of time, you know, that's the first part. And I'm not going to kind of go into too much detail about what all this looks like, but I will if people ask questions. And then creating the image embedding record, and then using insert from embedding. Here again was something else. This has to do with a hosted model, and I'm not going to demo this in this presentation, but that, you know, this is what I mean is like you do have the options of hosting on a, you know, external, either if you're hosting on your own server, or there's things like serverless inference, right? So you can host Hugging Face actually has serverless inference so that I can deploy models on Hugging Face and then go ahead and access the endpoints there directly. So it's a wide world out there, and that's pretty powerful, especially when you want to be testing multiple models. And but it would involve, you know, in a way, some series of extra steps, because it's not the same kind of clear-cut way that the AI server is working here, where it's expecting only, you know, the models that the FileMaker script steps are compatible with, right? So it's already kind of limited here. And with Hugging Face, basically the only difference is I need to be able to understand the model, understand the image, what kind of input, what kind of output I need to get, and customize it if I need to get any kind of special output. And then the last step is, of course, you know, performing the semantic find. So, I did this one already. So with, again, like, well, let me just redo it. So if I drag an image here, let's do the bird this time. So if I drag an image here, so I've already kind of pre-selected, like, this is the model that I want to use, because again, like with my search image, I need to make sure that I'm using the same model that I want to match with my other items. So when I hit image search here, it's going to generate an embedding for this image, and then it's going to search in my database for the most closely matched images that exist for in this model. So we've got, you know, again, like these aren't really high matches, right? But what's interesting is that if you look at the difference in the cosine this is for the thumbnail and this is for the full, they're different, right? So if I were to sort this list by highest to lowest, it would be in a different order than this list. So that's what I mean about the differences, and that if you're not consistent, you're gonna get slightly different results. So if your objective is to show the top 5 matches, you know, picking the consistency about what model or what image size you want to use would be really important. And the same thing goes for the horse one. Yeah, and this one, yeah, I remember seeing these ones were like even more, you know, I guess seeing the patterns, like the difference between the two. And in your performance semantic search script step, we have the like you can filter by cosine similarity. So if I want to say like, okay, I only want to find everything that's greater than 0.8, I can do that. But this is where it takes, you have to kind of evaluate all of this first, because for example, like the bird, we didn't find anything. And it was the goal to find the most closely matched, or if it's like only if it needs to reach a certain level. So there's things to consider when you're building this out in terms of, what does cosine similarity really mean in your solution and for your workflow? Because I don't think it means the same thing across the board. I can't just say 0.8 unless I've developed, I've understood the results in the model and what I'm getting in a way that shows me the results, or shows me that I know that this 0.8 will be significant of something. And so the way to do that is to start evaluating your image search. And in FileMaker, I've built this way of doing it. So I've built a way, so I've set up like 3 different evals, right? Or eval cases here. So I'm looking at, and these are all for image similarity, right? But I have a horse, a zebra, and a bird. So these 3 images, and I want to be able to test and compare, well, if I evaluate both of these models, which one returns better results. And so this is what it looks like when I've already run the eval for these. So here we can see, and now I've already chosen, like, so this is again beyond the thumbnail versus full size comparison. This is just a full size, right? So my size is consistent. So here's the clipfit B32. These are the top 10 results, and the L14 top 10 results. So the L14, again, this is the larger model. It's a little bit more fine-tuned, or not fine-tuned is the wrong word. It's a little bit more fine-grained in the amount of detail that we're capturing from the image, where this one is less. But it's really interesting how the search results are going to come up a little bit different. And even in the first 5, I'm not seeing any matching there. Okay, so 6 in the L14 is the same as 2. So this is, this is again where it's like playing with the models, getting to understand them. And this gives the human, right? So I can sit here and I can judge it. Like, do I think that these are good matches or bad matches? Evaluating an embedding model this way isn't going to mean I'm going to change a prompt, because there's no prompt to be changed, but I can kind of then calculate the totals of these and determine like, well, which ones are actually working and what should my, cosine similarity, minimum really be. So there's a way of kind of capturing the results, measuring them, having that human, right? So having somebody go through and look at the results and make their judgment. Well, what actually looks like a good match in order to find the best model for the job. So there's definitely a process to it. And, I don't want to make this more complicated than it is, but I do think that working with models, and it's finding the right model for the right job, right? And the right data set. So my data set, this is a data set that I downloaded that's just animal art, right? Fine art. So for animal fine art, does this model work out of the box? Do I want to try to find a more fine-tuned model that's been fine-tuned on art? What element of the art am I really looking for to match? Is it more in the style of the art? Is it the object? I mean, these are obviously all finding horses, right? Because that's the object of the image. So there's just so many kind of fascinating ways to look at it. And like I said, ways to kind of expand this and build on it, especially if you're not going to be using the insert embedding script step and you're going to be using insert from URL, then any number of models and hosting providers is kind of opens the door. But this gives us a good idea of what's actually available kind of like right out of the box, because it's really fast to set this stuff up when you're using the FileMaker tools for sure. And let's see, what else do I have? I just wanted to, review this. Like this, I think is the one-page synopsis, right? So making sure that you're sticking to one model for indexing and querying. So picking one model that you're going to be using for both the search image and the images that you're capturing in your inventory of images database. Making sure you just normalize all embeddings before comparison. Keeping image sizes consistent. Again, like, making sure that they're a consistent size. Choosing the right model for your use case. And again, like I put this in here, that the cohere will not work if you're using the native script steps. And that insert from URL opens up, more opportunities and areas and a more wider array of models that you can take advantage of. And making sure that you're securing your embeddings here and storing them in container fields for easier search. And one other thing I didn't mention that I'm going to just jump back into is about licensing. So when you're using an open source model, it comes with a license, and there's two main licenses. There's the MIT license and Apache, but there's a whole variety of other ones. But the OpenAI clip VIT models that we were looking at, these are under the MIT license. So this is kind of a rough synopsis of the license, but that, we don't have access to the training data. We don't know what exactly the training data was used for this model. If you redistribute, bundle, or host it, you are required to, give attribution to OpenAI for that. But you can use it in any way. It's not limited by, use case. So I think it's pretty open in that way. But I think these are important things to know, especially as we're getting more and more into using open source models. And there's definitely benefits to using open source models. And as you can see in this case, where this is the only option, right, in the native FileMaker script step way. So we're kind of forced into using this license. So I wanted to bring that up to people's attention as well, just so that you have that information and you're aware of what that looks like. And I think, so I don't know exactly how much time I have, Yul, but I'm happy to go into more detail in any area that people have more questions on, but I'm going to kind of sum it up there.
I think that's a good point to sum it up, actually, where we're sort of 9:20 now. So time here. So it'd be a good point to sum up, I think. Some really interesting stuff there, Kate. But go ahead, sum up, and we'll talk after.
Okay. Yeah, I think, the whole essence of this presentation is to just kind of touch on the idea that with vision models, we have a lot that we can do to analyze, to interpret, to compare images within FileMaker. And so this avenue that we have built into FileMaker is letting us, compare images in a really, useful, easy to set up way. But I just wanted to touch on and give people the resources that there's a lot more image models or vision models out there, and that there's a lot more that we can do with it as well. But getting started with this is really pretty simple. And I think kind of following that document that I wrote about, the gotchas and best practices, if you just follow this document, you should be pretty safe in implementing this. And it won't be that much of a hurdle, I believe. And those 2 blog posts, just following those, because those give pretty detailed instructions on how to do this step by step. So if you're curious about it or you think that this could be useful in your FileMaker solution, I hope that this provides a good starting point.
Great. That's fantastic.
Yep, really good.
Yeah, certainly some things I didn't know. And the licensing stuff was quite interesting. I sort of vaguely thought about it, but not really gone into it. So that's really useful, actually.
Awesome.
And the whole structure about how you're deciding this sort of thing, making the decisions that you need to make in implementing this. This is really useful, a great resource. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Has anyone got any questions?
I've got one. Kate, you were saying about like using the right model. So obviously my previous company, we dealt with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of comics. So one of the things I've been talking to the team about is going, right, how could you then use the image of the comic to then extract the characters from that comic via AI? So it's something I was looking at, and I literally just posted this online where you were talking. If I share the right screen here, so please share the right screen. Yeah, cool. If I share that, you guys will see this, and it really harps onto what you were saying about use the right models, find the models that are correct for you. But I just thought this is an AI and said, well, how would you find comic characters and what should you do with AI with an image model? When it goes through purpose of data sheet, find out what you want to do. But I thought this was the key bit, which is what you highlighted on. So this has gone away and said, well, there's a model for manga characters, there's a model for certain types of things. So just using a generic model that we've got built within FileMaker may not be suffice for what we need to do. So you're going to have to find the model that fits your purpose, fits your business need. And then from there, you can then go, right, I think I'm going to get a result that's going to be in the high 90s because I'm using the right model for the content that I'm providing. Literally uploading a comic sheet. I stuck the whole thing into basically Claude while you were doing this and said, right, okay, find me the characters in here. And it came out and said, oh, that one's Superman, that one's Batman. And it came up with these ones. I thought we'd do a context of a character. And it came up with 4 characters. It didn't find the 5th one because the image size was too small. So it really reiterates what you're saying is there's no point putting a thumbnail up because it's just not going to read it. So I continued on and said there's 5 characters. When I can't read it, uploaded a higher res image, all of a sudden it found MonkeyBread. So it's knowing the context of what you're putting into it to know what you get back out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think we're kind of new in this area. And so there's no real manual on this. You kind of have to play with it and get to know it. But what you did there was perfect, right? You're like, oh, okay, let me try a higher res. And then you get the answer. And thinking about that, oh, okay, image size really does matter.
And then when you get to comics like this, where you just go, we've got lots of characters on there, then I was like, how's it going to do? And he got all of them. Because it was high enough res. It literally got all of them. But that's pushing it through Claude. So that's the point of stepping away and running similar to what Wim was saying as well, using models, MCP models and stuff like that. So we can then pass a bit of that data from our solutions within FileMaker, put it out to the cloud, let it go and do something. There's no IP with this. This is public domain. So these comics are in the public domain. So from my point of view, it's something that integrating your solution. Now, I have Ian's here, so he will probably chip in and say this, but Ian, if I was to do this model on our database, we've got about 300,000 comics sitting in the database. If I was to then loop through those records, how long is that going to take? It will probably take weeks, if not years. I don't know. But it's got to go through all those records and process them and see the characters. But the guys will probably just do it on new releases going forward so then we can get that hierarchy. But the idea of this could really fuel the website to then search for characters. So find me all the covers with Batman on it. Done. May not even be a Batman comic. Could be a mix-up between 2 storylines, but Batman's on the cover. So this is fascinating for me. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, and I think that's where, the model, we didn't really touch on, the infrastructure, right, of how you're hosting your model or what resources you're giving it. Because obviously the more resources you give it, you're going to be able to generate that batch of 300,000 embeddings. You could do it on a quicker level. And then if you're using serverless inference, so you could pay for more GPU or, and then scale down when you don't need it as much, right? So sometimes that's what this is like. Oh, I just needed an initial batch creation or analyzation. Yeah.
for me, if you could do the model, we're in a VM infrastructure, so if you could do the model and load those models into a FileMaker server, it doesn't matter if it sits there with a database and takes a week and chunks through them. It's all local. It's not causing any problems. It's just processing time that I've got. And yeah, okay, the rack will get a bit hot.
Right.
A bit more cooling, but that's fine.
Right. And for your example, right, you do need a multimodal, model, one that can right. So you need that space to be able to communicate in text and image.
Yeah, probably a quarter of the covers wouldn't even be recognized because of the way they were inferring. And this is also, you're taking artist impression. So so you've got very different styles of people drawing characters, and the model's got to be intelligent enough to know that. And I think it comes back to what you were saying about learning as well. So you get the results back and you upload your 5 different artists to start with, see what his ranking is, and try and whether you can train the model in that way, I don't know. But there's options there as well. But
yeah,
I think it's fascinating stuff. There's so much avenue for this. Really
cool.
Yeah, I've got a friend who's was an antiques dealer. And he's been using Google Lens to try and find images of jewelry and identify them. And he said when he first did it, he got really good results, but lately he's got really bad results. So now I'm thinking, okay, what are the reasons for that? So a couple of reasons jump out at me. One is him. He could be using lower res images, exactly like Gary's just discovered.
Yep.
And there were a couple of things. There's something in Wim's talk, which I've forgotten what it was now, that made me think about it, that maybe they've changed the model at their end. Maybe there are fewer data points, or they're changing the resolution size of their model. So yeah, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, especially with Google. I mean, he's just using it, right, the Google Lens out of the box.
Yeah, Google Lens out of the box.
So I have to imagine that there's also an algorithm there. I mean, of course, the Google algorithm. So how are they determining, right? Are they always giving you the best match, or is there some sort of other, identifier that's going to base that search on?
Yeah, or have they cottoned on that estate agents might find it quite useful and don't want to give too much value away? Another option, or I mean, there are so many options of things that could be there.
Interesting.
But yes, it's we possibly need to think that they're not all out there with the best benefit. So there might be other interests preventing the matches that you want if you're using a publicly available model, for example.
Right.
Should we turn the recording off at that point, Gary, and move to the virtual bar?
I can do that. I just want to say thanks for everyone. Great session.
I want to say thanks to everyone. And can you grab the chat and give it to me, and I'll post it up on the site?
Yeah.